Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 25. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I really want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, and commented. Also, those of you who have subscribed and continue to listen to the show. All right, your support allows us to bring on more expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. From sandbags, training gear, and supplements to lifting straps, knee sleeves, and more, Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. If you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use our promo code strength_game at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. That's strength_game. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by a friend of mine, fellow coach, Chris Cervantes. Chris is an assistant director for athletic performance at the University of Tulsa, where he works with the football team, leads the training for the Golden Hurricanes volleyball and women's tennis programs, as well as runs a variety of the other programs' sports science areas after being promoted from his internship role in 2019. Prior to his arrival at Tulsa, he spent time as an intern strength coach at the University of Texas, the University of Colorado, and the University of Denver. A former college rugby athlete, Cervantes had a brief stint with semipro club team before diving deep into heavy conjugate style training and even dabbling with a few half marathons to test his mettle. He is still heavily involved in lifting and uses his own training to test out new programs, technology, and ideas and programs on himself before implementing them with his athletes. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Chris Cervantes. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited. I'm joined by a buddy of mine that I've got to link up with a few times. Unfortunately, COVID shut it down for this year out in Tulsa. Chris Cervantes, how's it going, man?
It's going good, man. I appreciate you having me on here, man. Really excited.
Yeah, of course, man. It's I wish we got to catch up, like I said, this year. Always like to link up with some people when I'm in town. But hey, we'll do it here, and we'll see what you got going on. So I want to roll right into it. Kind of start off with how you first got into training. Like, you've been doing a lot of performance-based training. You did some conjugate style stuff, and I mean, played rugby for a long time. But what really got you involved in lifting and some of the sports you played to get you to this point?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I feel like it's kind of every strength coach, but I was kind of a smaller kid. You know what I mean? And I knew I wasn't very like proprioceptively aware. I wasn't very talented. Just put it that way. I wasn't very gifted athletically. And I wanted to play sports. I went to kind of a small school. We didn't have too many sports at our school, so I saw a city rugby league. I was like, oh, I'll go play in that. And kind of realized pretty quick, I was like, man, I better hit the weights. I'm pretty small here. And then when I got into college, same kind of thing. I came into college pretty small. I was about $150. And I got an offer to play at Denver. And, I was like, again, if I want to compete at this level, I got to really kind of get serious, and I kind of got to figure out, something that's not even the most bang for my buck. I had a lot of catching up to do, kind of. And then kind of just grew from there. Like in college, our strength coach was our rugby coach. So we kind of in this gray zone. We weren't really quite a club sport, but we weren't really quite, we're in a Division I sport either. So we got to use the facilities, but we had to go like after hours. And it was with our rugby coach, and he was running a lot of our program. And it was a lot of kind of just, hey, press heavy, kind of squat a little bit. And then, the rest of it, I think was a lot of shoulders. And I was like, man, there's got to be more to this. And kind of was messing around, looking at different programs. So that's how I got into the conjugate think it was summer my junior year. Went home. We wouldn't stay around for training. We'd go home. And so we kind of played around that summer doing some powerlifting, stuff like that. Saw some pretty good improvements. Strength-wise, I got pretty excited with that. And it's really just kind of been that. Just been kind of fell in love with the weights. Tried to play after college. Played semi-pro for a little bit and realized pretty quick didn't really have a shot at going pro. Wasn't really that good. But I've always just kind of loved training. I've always loved kind of seeing what the body is capable of and kind of where you can push things and kind of go with that. So yeah, that's kind of my story, working out in a nutshell.
No, that's cool to hear. I mean, it seems like that for a lot of rugby teams. We had one in my school too, and I think they were D2 and then they bumped up to D1, and just, I mean, the effort that those guys put in, and like even at a club level, whatever it is, like you see it a little bit different. And sometimes like now us like at the, what people would say like the pinnacle, like D1
Right.
college, sometimes I feel like those guys that play like the club level sports have more of an enthusiasm and passion sometimes, and it frustrates me.
Yeah, you kind of have to, man. That, like, I remember when I was playing semi-pro, I was working in a physical therapy clinic. So I'd go work, 10, 11 hours, and then I had to go to practice. And after practice, I got to get my workout and then have time. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, if you don't really love the sport, what would you be doing this for? You know what I mean? Whereas, yeah, I feel like kind of sometimes, some of the kids we work with, stuff like that, they get, they just kind of get not handed these situations, but they're talented enough to get somewhere, and they've never seen really kind of the struggle of like, man, if you really want to pursue kind of being successful in this, you got to really commit to it. You know what I mean? So I will say that's the one kind of silver lining of having been in that situation you had, to really appreciate what you were doing, to invest that much time into it. Fortunately, I never got pretty good at it, but
hey, you went under the bar for it, and you got some experience on the field. So, I mean, that's all that matters, and it puts you in the position you are now, like as a coach. I mean, what was your kind of first introduction? I know you were able to get in the facility at Denver. Like, I don't know back then if it was as nice as it is now, but
yeah. So they had just redone it. Pat Bowlen had just given the investment. Super nice facility. At the time, I didn't even, to be honest with you, in undergrad, we didn't have like exercise physiology. It was like general bio, microbio, or environmental science. And I was doing general bio at the time. I thought I was going to go into healthcare, and I didn't know much about exercise physiology, stuff like that. We had a general kind of physiology course, and after college, I was like, I didn't know what to do. Was kind of trying to get to med school, didn't get in, and somebody kind of suggested physical therapy, and that's when I kind of started learning about like exercise science, stuff like that, because that's when it really kind of grew that passion. And I realized pretty quick I wanted to, kind of want to work with athletes. I was like, man, I don't really want to be in healthcare. A lot of our patients were geriatric patients at the time too, and I was like, man, these people don't really want to. I'm coming up with these programs like that, and all they want to do is walk. They just want to go back to playing golf. But yeah, kind of my experience with training and stuff like that was just having to kind of not teach myself, but kind of go out there and learn these different, whether it was conjugate, whether it was undulating model, stuff like that, kind of go look for it myself, kind of see what's out there, what are these different programs, is it linear, stuff like that. And that was kind of my experience in, hey, what works, what doesn't work, what's kind of getting me the most results, what kind of isn't.
no, that's a great way to kind of test everything out. And like you said, like finding a love for training, finding a love from lifting and everything that carried over. And I think most coaches, unless they really know they want to be a coach right after, they kind of go through those growing pains of figuring out like which profession or like which area of expertise they want to take, like exercise science or human performance or anything.
Right.
And I mean, I've heard that same story from a bunch of people. I mean, when I originally got going, I thought I wanted to be an athletic trainer, and I found out day one that was not it. No disrespect to them. Nothing against them, but no, not a chance.
I think you nailed it on the head there saying growing pains. It's really kind of what it is, figuring out where your passion is. I think with coaching, it really is a passion. You know what I mean? For a lot of people, you got to love this if you want to do this. So I think that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, definitely figuring out where your passion lies is huge. I mean, once you kind of found that, I know you kind of talked about how like you got involved in it. I mean, you went from staying kind of around your alma mater, you went from Denver to Colorado to Texas to Tulsa, and then getting elevated to that position. Like, what kind of along the way did you pick up? Because I mean, you did pretty much almost as many internships as I did, and then you went right into the next stop like as a full-time coach. Like, what did you
Right.
kind of pick up along the way that like really solidified that coaching was for you?
Uh, when I originally got into this, I've always been pretty curious, I guess, about the body and been pretty into kind of we call it X's and O's, the science behind stuff like that. But I got pretty lucky with a lot of the mentors I had, and they've always kind of challenged me in different ways. At Denver, they really challenged us how to think, how to really identify, like, what is your training? What is it really doing? Like, can you define, like, what's the stimulus? Like, don't give me a general answer. Like, be really specific in understanding why you're supplying the stress to the body, what you're looking for, what your goal is, stuff like that. But as I went over to Colorado, um, I was working under Coach Wilson at the time. He was great with the kids, man. He really inspired them. He really kind of motivated. And that was the first time I kind of got to see kind of the human side of it, I guess you could say, or the kind of more like sociological side of it. And that was really cool. The way he kind of impacted these kids, I thought, wow, I'm in the right place. It's just the kind of feeling you had with it, like as far as the field goes. And so it's kind of the reason I like, especially working in the collegiate settings, you kind of get the blend of, from a biological standpoint, biological age, these kids are impressionable biologically. We can do a lot with the stress and really adapt them, but also like psychologically and sociologically, they're really impactful. And I think that part's really cool. I think there's a lot of really valuable lessons you can kind of give, kind of using these tangible means of the weight or whatever to teach kind of intangible concepts. And so I think kind of bouncing around from there and then working for Coach McKnight over at Texas was watching just the way that they were able to kind of teach these young men really kind of these different lessons. I thought that was truly just inspiring. And that's kind of what I really knew. Like, this is what I want to do. You know what I mean? I'll be honest, there's always going to be that part of me that's selfish. I really am just curious about training in these different modalities and how we can kind of push performance to kind of another level. And I spent a ton of time investigating that, but there's definitely a huge component of it that I really just love being able to interact with this population day in and day out.
No, that's great. I mean, I definitely want to get into like your curiosity and like how you involve your training. I'm going to save that for later, but like the internship stuff, like to touch on that, like that was the most important thing to me for sure. And I know like that kind of gets thrown around and some people are for it, against it, want to pay for it, all that stuff. But
I
I
think
mean,
I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything in the world. I think it was so valuable
exactly.
to learn from other people. I think it was really, I'll be honest, when I went to Colorado originally, I wouldn't say I was arrogant, but I'd say like, I thought, I was coming to Denver. I thought like, we'd spend so much time as evidence-based practice stuff. And, I thought I knew it all. And there were so many lessons I got to learn and get just challenged all the time. My thinking or my involvement and stuff like that. And I think there's so many things that I couldn't have gotten to where I am without that and without being challenged. I think there's a lot of growth that occurs as being an intern. I think it really will challenge you as far as from a passion standpoint. Is this really what you want to do? I think you have to kind of go through some of those the intern duties aren't great. Nobody loves cleaning weight rooms. But I think it's really valuable to teach you to respect it. I think it's really valuable to teach you to understand, what it takes to run a facility, how much is involved with an operation, working in athletics, the collegiate setting is. I think those are all really valuable lessons that there's only one way to learn it. That's really to get your hands dirty. You can read any book you want, but at the end of the day, until you're out there, whether it's coaching, whether it's helping, the liaison between these other departments, whether it's sports med or the dietitian, stuff like that. There's so many valuable aspects to internships. And I think a lot of it, there's no way I could be where I am right now without having gone through that, having had those mentors there to help me along the way and kind of push me and challenge me like that.
No, that's great. That's a great way to sum. That's exactly how I feel. Like it is a rite of passage. And I mean, for whatever reason, hopefully you're not stuck in internships forever.
Right.
And the hardest part for sure, luckily you didn't have to go through it, was like I went intern, bounced around, did a few internships, did a GA, and then had nothing. And then went
Oh,
back
man.
to an internship.
Yeah.
And that was I still learned a bunch from it, but like that was a shot to the ego. I was like,
No doubt.
I've got everything. I thought I knew something. I knew at that point, I was like, hey, I got letters behind my name. I've got a degree. I've got experience at this many schools. I've coached, I've led, I've followed. And I was like, I'm right back to square one. It
What else
was
can I do?
exactly. But I honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like you said, I learned some stuff that I don't want to do. I learned some stuff that I really like that I continue to lean on mentors for going forward. But I mean, I don't understand how people want to skip that process and go right into the coaching side. You miss a ton from it. And like you said, just going through and doing it, you have to go through that experience, and you
I have
can't.
to.
I mean, the same with like a CEO working its way up through the company. If you
Right.
started at the very bottom and you know exactly what that entails, then you can step back into that position whenever need be, because that's, you know exactly what all
Been
the
through.
working pieces are going to be. Yeah,
Right.
because you go through it.
Exactly.
Exactly. Hey, so what, like going from the transition, like you went to Tulsa originally as an intern. So what was some of like maybe one of the bigger, lesser known changes that you really had to undergo in that transition process going from intern to full-time coach? Like what were some of the big changes that you
I
saw?
think I think everyone thinks there's this like antithesis moment of like, hey, not in this full time role. When you're an intern, you're always kind of not being told what to do, but kind of there's kind of understood like, hey, here are my responsibilities, my duties. And I think when you get in a full time position, it's kind of just expected that you kind of know what to do at that point while you're getting hired. And I think so. A big transition is just to realize nobody's going to be checking in to make sure that you're keeping up with your stuff. You're just going to be held accountable to whether or not you got whatever was done. Is your plan done? Is your do you have your training regimens put together? Are you running your teams? Have you scheduled your teams? Have you talked with we have each one of us here guys are like individual athletic trainers for our sports. Have you met with them? Have you kind of gone through all your need analysis stuff and stuff like that, medical history, et cetera? Nobody's going to hold your hand or tell you like, hey, this is, okay, now you got to do this. It's kind of just expected you do. And if you don't, you know what I mean? You're going to be held accountable to that. And I think kind of that big transition into the next role was just having to understand like, hey, it's on me, I guess, now to keep myself accountable. Whereas I think when you're an intern, not that there's leeway, but kind of in the sense that the responsibilities you have are almost dictated to you. And so really that initiative is on you now. You know what I mean? Nobody's there to kind of guide you to it. It's on you to figure it out. I think that's really powerful. Again, the growing pain thing is powerful. Kind of thing you have to go through. Yeah, you gotta kind of go through that.
Right. Yeah, and I would say like thinking about it in that context, like you kind of put forward, if you didn't have like those internship experiences and those opportunities where you kind of were afforded times where you were meant to fail or supposed to fail and you were learn from them, if someone would have skipped those positions and gone right into a full-time position, yeah, no one's holding your hand, no one's really looking over your shoulder to make sure you're doing things right, you're probably getting fired in the first few
No
months.
doubt. You wouldn't know what to do. You'd be lost. There was a coach, he's at Colorado State now, but he was one of the assistants when I was down in Austin, Scott McClafferty. Man, he was on us all the time. We were interns. And at first, he used to drive me nuts. It's like, man, I can't. This guy's always on me, And then I started realizing, wow, I'm really good at what I'm doing because in my mind, I'm like, I better do this or Scott is going to get on me about this. And that kind of mindset, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. You know what I mean? Now, and sometimes I give our interns not a hard time, but I kind of push them a little bit to always be thinking about something like, at what point are you going to just know what to start doing before you have to start getting told that? We're going to be able to process kind of that next step. But because it was such a valuable tool for me to have gone through that, to have had somebody like that to challenge me like that all the time. And if you, like I said, if you'd skip that, it'd be tough, man. I mean, nobody be not unhireable, but be real hard time getting hired. You know what I mean? I think it kind of not instilled a work ethic, but it kind of fostered a work ethic. That was already there. Like, yeah, obviously, if you're going to work in this field, you have to have a pretty decent work ethic. But it really kind of just, I guess, pointed it and sharpened it a little bit. Hey, what can we be doing? What aren't we doing? What needs to get done? How can we continue to progress and improve versus kind of that status quo mindset? Okay, I did that now. Job done.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I definitely preach to our interns as well is if I teach you one thing, I get it if you mess it up the next time or you ask another question following up on it. Maybe you're nervous, you don't have the confidence, you really just don't understand. But if I have to tell you again, then, and you're not anticipating like what's going to happen next, you're not already thinking about how the setup looks when like a certain team lifts at this point in time, or you're not looking at the schedule, then we have an issue, because I'm not going to hold your hand forever.
Right.
And we have a standard expectations that we want to do. And if you want to be in my position, which is what I'm trying to groom you for, so I can move up, you could take my place and we can continue the cycle. If you're not prepared for that and I'm not pushing you and you don't see your faults, then you're not going to be able to have this job, because I'm doing those things. And that's what I'm
Right.
trying to get you to do.
The thing about athletics, man, is it's not high stakes, but kind of, compared to other environments, it's cutthroat. You know what I mean? You're always kind of having to push. Hey, are we improving? Are we getting better? Whether, it's tangible metrics, whether it's, a culture, whatever it is, you've always got to be pushing to try and progress. And that comes, I think, too, is, we have to kind of emulate that a little bit. And so when it comes to interns and stuff like that, like, yeah, there's got to be that initiative, and there's got to be that, are you paying attention? Are you retaining what we're teaching you? It's not just, hey, I'm going to tell you every time. I'm expecting that you're going to start picking it up, moving forward. That's also one of the reasons, when I was at Denver, when I was at Colorado, these tell us too, like, hey, go through, we'd go through their training cycles, whatever it was, we're going through that. We would not only from a setup standpoint, so you can understand how it's going to flow, you can see how it's going to move, you can understand what you're asking your athletes to put themselves into. You know what I mean? I think that's a really valuable tool. Kind of like you look at it from, as an intern, you're going to coach these guys up on it. You better know what it feels like, what you're looking for, what are the faults, stuff like that. And if you're going to have expectations movement-wise, understand what's required of that movement and that movement outcome. Be sure that you can replicate and show that and teach that.
Right. Yeah, those are all great points. I mean, looking back, if you were to start your career like a little bit differently, like, is there any advice you would tell first year coach Chris Cervantes, or any other advice you would give to like a first year full-time coach that you would think could put him in the right direction a little bit quicker?
I think the two biggest things, I think one is it's kind of that process, and like, how much are you anticipating? I think at some point interns kind of get there. If I could have gotten there sooner, I think I would have had not necessarily more opportunities, but I think it would have benefited me just to be thinking, hey, instead of just thinking, hey, I know I got to set this up, like, to be, like you said, looking ahead, what's next? And another piece of advice I'd say, maybe finding an alternative to caffeine. I think this caffeine addiction now is getting a lot of hand. No, but I think that's the biggest one. I think truly it's just, can you walk away every day with like, hey, what did I learn today? I think there were days where I initially, especially transitioned from healthcare, I walked away and was just kind of like, okay, I got through today. It's not about getting through, right? It's about progressing. So I think that'd be kind of the biggest one. What did you walk away from today? What did you learn today? It could have been how to set something up quicker. It could have been how to clean something. It could have been, oh, we do this training modality because of this. Whatever it is, just what are you learning? What are you taking away from your experience?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, sometimes, we know the hours, we know the requirements, and sometimes interns are not prepared for that, and they literally just get into survival mode.
Right.
And sometimes even as full-time coaches, we're in the same boat. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get to the next hour, the next team, trying to find lunch on the road. I'm just trying to work through. And sometimes you really don't have time to debrief or evaluate a situation or talk to a team exactly like you want to. So it's good to have some breaks where you can actually sit there and think about like, hey, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What did I learn today? And reevaluate. And as an intern, when you don't have the same pressures and you're not communicating with head coaches, athletic trainers, or not in all the meetings and stuff, yeah, you have some requirements where you're learning about the facility maintenance and cleaning. And it's not to just pin it off on you, but it's to appreciate the other stuff while the other coaches are working. And honestly, that's a great opportunity to think about, hey, like, this could be situated here better. What does he mean when he teaches this? Like, just being on the floor is different, especially if you're not used to training a lot. So,
Right.
Those are all valuable things that anybody, first year head coach, first year intern, those are great pieces of advice. So kind of going through, like, you talked about your training a little bit, like when you were getting ready for rugby, and then talked even a little bit like through your internship experience and knowing how to teach certain things. And being prepared to be under the bar so your athletes understand what's going on. What are some of kind of the benefits using your own training specifically? Because I know what you like to do. You're not necessarily working for a sport or a strength sport or anything. I mean, you lift heavy as hell, but like you test a lot of your own ideas and you plan ahead and you prepare for your athletes to come in using your own training cycle, basically being your own test subject. So besides being able to like test out programs, how does your own training improve your coaching?
I think, especially, 'cause I like to do triphasic, you know what I mean? There's plenty of other modalities out there, but I think when you're going to ask your athletes to put themselves under some decent amount of stress, whether that, I mean, for me, I think like the heavy isometrics, the heavy eccentrics, but even if you're not doing that, you're doing some totally different mode, like training style. The point is, if you're going to ask your athletes to undergo a lot of mechanical stress, you better know what that mechanical stress feels like. You better know what you're asking of your athlete, in the sense of how it's going to feel psychologically, how it's going to feel physiologically, what that recovery is going to look like. And then I think I like to look at what are points of, hey, you know, if we're doing a lot of this, you know, what is it going to feel like in a recovery standpoint? Oh, we're going to get tight erectors, or we're going to get, our erectus is going to get pretty tight. Like, what are we looking at as common kind of pitfalls? I think the other side of it too, kind of guinea pigging myself, is if I'm going to ask an athlete to do something, I better know it works. You know what I mean? I can't. Sure, a lot of people have gone and reported, hey, I did this worked, but until I truly kind of see it for myself, you know, do I truly believe in it? I guess it's the way I kind of look at it. And that doesn't mean I'm not always gonna, you know, I mean, I appreciate the fact that I'm pretty slow twitch as a human. You know what I mean? I'm not jumping 40 inches anytime soon, stuff like that. But can I see, are these things actually going to transfer? Are they actually going to improve? And I like to test it on myself and see, you know, does that actually work? To actually see a change? And be honest with myself. Like, am I putting myself in that situation where, so if I'm, you know, like right now I've got this baby coming, okay, you know, if I'm in some acute stress situation, like kid would see in, you know, maybe high academic period, or family stress, stuff like that, how is that going to impact his training? You know what I mean? So maybe working out on a day we didn't get a lot of sleep and stuff like that, and still taking yourself through a cycle, hey, what's that feel like? Could be totally different. You know what I mean? And it's good to kind of note on what it is I'm feeling, how it is I'm seeing, like, result wise, stuff like that, and how I can expect that to transfer to the athletes. So I think both from just experiencing what the sheer quantity of stress that you're putting on an athlete, whether, you know, it's mechanical, whether it's, you know, bioenergetic stress, whatever that is, how that feels, how you can expect them to feel kind of going through that, and then to kind of see what the environmental stress is and how that's going to affect it too, and to see, can we see results? Can we see, you know, did this modality work? Did it not? And it's not, you know, nuts on all the time. There's going to be variance. Everybody's a little bit different, but can I expect for the most part, you know, how reliable is this going to work?
No, I love that. That's awesome to hear. And in a more practical sense too, when you do this, do you have like a certain approach you like to do? Like, are you a week ahead of the programming? Are you thinking of like the off season, the next program? Or
I used to, especially when I first got to Tulsa, I used to be about 6 weeks ahead. That's how I kind of look at it, because I'd be like, okay, I got here. It was kind of that discretionary period. So I was like, I'm gonna look at it like I'm gonna start the off-season training now. And when they got into off-season, I was kind of getting towards the tail end of it, kind of looking into kind of the preseason stuff, a little more power cycle and stuff like that. And there's times there'll be you know, breaks in there, especially now having you know, when I got here as an intern, I really just had volleyball that I was programming for. And then as I kind of moved up a little bit, I got volleyball, I got our developmental football guys, I got in season. I think in the first year it was linebackers and safeties. So not every program is going to transfer over to every athlete specifically, but for the most part, general stuff. You know, whether it's like different like complexes, different potentiation clusters, stuff like that, or you know, whether it's like the different like eccentric stuff like that. So yeah, now having a couple other sports on top of that, like I know you have multiple sports. Obviously not every training arrangement's the same, but you generally try and stay for the most part roughly ahead a little bit, or looking at specifically like, okay, here's what I want to kind of look at that I think will transfer for most of the sports in a general standpoint, in kind of a preseason or in season, like whether it's looking at like high force, high velocity stuff or stuff like that.
Right. No, that's awesome. I mean, the principles are going to apply to the majority of the sports.
Exactly.
Too.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So
I saw a quote somewhere. I think it was Tim Murray now down at Denver, but it was like rigid principles, flexible methods. You know what I mean? Understand that, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different modalities we can use as long as like you said, the principles are going to transfer for the most part.
right. Definitely. So like when you're going through and you're thinking about adding something in, whether it's like triphasic, or I know you were using like the Flex Stronger, like the VBT system,
Yeah.
and doing some stuff with DSI and even some speed development stuff. If you're trying to test something specifically, how do you kind of tailor that into your program? Do you kind of sprinkle a little bit of each and then around your own training, like trying to find what you want to test, what you want to do personally for yourself? How do you kind of fix that into the program and then like keep track of your results and then use it so that you can actually implement it in players training
Right.
later down the line?
But generally, we'll look at like, okay, what's the stimulus I really want, right? So whether it's like absolute strength or something like that, and then I'll look at, what are the different modalities? What are the different ways we can do this? I have a spreadsheet, and it's got to be like 30 tabs long. It's a bunch of little like battery tests, like a DSI, an RSI. There's another one that's like, I think it's just a transfer index. So I'll pick like, okay, let's say, do I see a correlation between, call it sprint speed, and my back squat number? And so I'll look at back squat at the beginning of the strength cycle. Back squat, what's the difference? And I'll see what did that percent difference match the percent difference in whatever my running speed is. I'll put a GPS on and run with that and see, if it did, we can say that, there's a correlation. If not, and I understand that it's multifactorial, but, just generally kind of looking at stuff like that. So I'll generally kind of just pick different traits or different stimulus I want to focus on for a few weeks. And I'll kind of have different tests or different, like baselines and kind of results to kind of see where I want to go and did it work? And there's times that it hasn't. There's times that I've wasted 6 weeks, but I'll go through 4 or 6 weeks and maybe I didn't get stronger. You know what I mean? We did a cycle a few years ago. It was me and Jevin Bowman here. We only front squatted for like 5 weeks, 6 weeks. We got heavier on we got stronger on front squats. We wanted to see, would that transfer, would our jump heights increase? And we did like, different complexes where we would pair it with different plyos and stuff like that. Still kind of tackling a little bit of that elasticity and stuff like that. And we wanted to see, would it increase our back squats? Totally didn't. Totally backfired on us. We got under, I think it was like 70% first time putting a bar on our back in those first 2 weeks, and it was miserable. It happens. You learn. It's a learning moment. You know what I mean? So it's just fun. I think it's fun to see, what are the different ways that we can push performance. I think I like to test it on myself and really just to see, does it work?
No, that's cool because it keeps your training fresh. It keeps the programs for the athletes up to date. And at the end of the day, we can use them kind of as guinea pigs as long as like we don't really just write that down or tell admin that we're using
Right. Yeah,
test
exactly.
subjects. Right. But if we can test some of the stuff on ourselves first, having the knowledge and education and background that we do have, and be able to tweak it. And like if you get to something that's just complete trash, it's not getting the stimulus and the results that you want, then you live and you learn from it. And you did. Right. We know, we talked about in the beginning, like wins and losses and the high stress of being at a collegiate setting and being a Division I program, like performance is important. So, if you go back and look and you waste 6 weeks because you wanted to try a theory on the athletes rather than try it on yourself when you could have preemptively done that, like that could be the difference between elite performance and mediocre performance for the year.
I think you kind of talked about earlier too, where you said, what's one thing I could go back, kind of saying right there, this is a great job. I love this job. Wouldn't trade for the world. But at the end of the day, it is a career. It's not a hobby. We don't do this stuff. These training programs, right? It's not for fun. You know what I mean? Yeah, it is fun doing it. But our jobs are on the line for it. You know what I mean? And so I think if you're not doing your due diligence in that, whether that's testing this stuff out, investigating, whatever, it's a disservice to your athletes, it's a disservice to your program. And so you've got to approach it with that professionalism. Yeah, I'd like to train. Yeah, I'd like to lift heavy. But it's also part of my job. It's also part of what I need to be able to ask athletes to be able to do. I better make sure the way I'm doing it is safe, appropriate. And, at the end of the day, we're not here to get any results. We're here to get the best results we can. We've got to be, again, pushing that envelope all the time of how can we improve performance? How can we put these athletes in the best situation, both to reduce injury, but also to increase any KPIs that might be prevalent to their sport.
I love that. I mean, that seems to be the disconnect that I see. And I've heard sport coaches talk about it. I've heard athletes talk about it. And unfortunately, I've heard admin talk about it, is like questioning why, like, you guys are during office hours or when you're actually getting paid your training. I was like, there's a persona that comes along with strength coaches. One, we love to train. Two, we're testing stuff on ourselves. Three, I can guarantee if one of my players comes in and sees me doing the program or doing an exercise they see, that's already buy-in. So a lot of what we do ends up being stuff that you can't quantify. You can't put it on a piece of paper and say, oh, he checked that box, he's doing this. This increases their buy-in this much, this increases. Right. So with that in mind, like when we're talking about trying to get elite performance, have you given it any thought, or do you have any opinion on a way that strength coaches kind of can evaluate themselves on whether or not they're being successful or having success as a coach in the career with their athletes? Because we don't get wins and losses. Our contracts aren't built on that. But obviously coaches get fired for being tied into sport coaches and
right.
just big money jobs. But like at our level, like being a lower Division I, not a Power 5 school technically, where do you kind of see our success like being measured in?
So I look at the big one I look at would be the injuries, right? Non-contact injuries. So with volleyball and women's tennis, a little bit easier to say, hey, are we putting them in a situation are we putting them in a situation to be successful in their sport without high risk of injury? So I look at can we look at, are we reducing that? So look at how often are they in the training room? What are they getting looked at? We collect injury reports, tracking stuff like that. And then I'll create all kinds of KPIs for these guys. So, with volleyball, I love it. They want to talk about, okay, what's their approach? What's the approach now? And they always want to be over 10 feet. Always cracks me up, over 10 feet. And I was actually listening to Coach Scruggs over at South Carolina talk about it one time. We said, where's this metric coming from? What's this number? What's this value? The net is obviously not that high. You should be able to jump before you get recruited over to touch over the top of the net. So why are we getting this number? You look at stuff that has a ceiling effect, like jump height at some point is kind of a ceiling effect. If it was that simple to just lift weights or jump higher, like, the Olympics would have new records every Olympics. So at some point you got to look at other factors, exit velocity, stuff like that. So I kind of try and create ways for these coaches I try and give them, here's some KPIs you want to look at, and here's how we can show you that we're improving that. We can show you, again, the risk of injury stuff, and we can just kind of look at you guess you can call it the culture. What's the demeanor? What's the training regimen? What are we kind of tailoring your athletes as far as the work ethic goes? I think we've done a pretty good job, at least here with the teams I've worked with. I got lucky that they were inherently already kind of hard workers, but I think now we've really instilled just the value of kind of the training process. And I think it shows up in practices. I think, the tactile and the technical stuff. I think that's on, I'm not a sport coach. I'm not gonna give them better skills, but I can give you an athlete that's going to have better qualities. That's going to show up when they skill acquire.
That's a great point. I mean, looking at what we do in the weight room and everything, it's general. So if we can give them a better athlete, a better product, they can mold them into a better blank kind of athlete. And that's what it looks like. But I like how you talk about like finding new ways and like finding a conversation, a question with your coaches. It's like, where does this metric coming from? Like, especially like track and even something like volleyball where it's 10 feet. It's like, where does this come from? Has this been passed down for 50 years? Did this come from your old head coach? Like, you're not trying to stir the pot and like upset them, but
like, no, I'm just trying to understand What's his value? You know what I mean? If I can understand the significance of the value, we can reevaluate it. But I think at some point there's just other factors to consider. That's one value that I think we kind of looked at, and I was like, this number doesn't really serve us any purpose. So kind of looking at that now, we're looking at with some of the GPS stuff for football, we looked at peak speed we can improve to a certain extent, but then to a certain extent they're just it's like a 5% impactability, I think. So let's look at, okay, you're closer to the snap of the ball. Let's look at acceleration. How well can you cover ground quickly? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to open up. It's that, top speed in sports is generally opportunity based, and you're not going to have that opportunity very often. But you can take that same thought process to just about, any other trade with tennis. I was talking with them. You got to have power, obviously, when you swing. That's going to create negative for that ball. We can look at different metrics to track different exit velocities, whether not necessarily swing, but, whether it's lateral jump, something like that, in direction work, stuff like that. We can take a look at that as well. You know what I mean? But it's just defining what's the quality you really want at its core, and then how can we improve that to give you a better general athlete. I think some of that has to come with an open conversation with your sport coach, and you need to be able to really tangibly define what it is you're looking for from a performance standpoint. Where does it you see the kind of the pitfalls of the team now if they need to improve?
That's great. Like finding a way to evaluate the team, strengths, weaknesses, and then have the coach, sit there and identify exactly what they want to improve.
Right.
As sports performance coaches, strength coaches, whatever you want to call it, like our job is to take what they want, like those key performance indicators, have some input on them, but take their terminology from their sport, decipher it so that we can actually work on the performance side of it and give them a better product. But at the end of the day, like you said it best, like if it's not making us better, if you have an old kind of like volleyball 10-foot marker, like that's good. I get it. That's great. If that's what you want as a marker, but is it actually making us better? Yes or no?
Right.
Then if it's not, why is all our focus on this?
Right. I think you said it really well right there. You're talking about take their terminology, because every coach has got the different ways they're going to do it. And it's not their job, I get it, to understand some of these traits or some of these physiological adaptations that they want. So they're gonna call it something different. That's fine. I get that. But yeah, I think just being able to identify, because coaches love to say we need to be more explosive. Such a classic across all sports. Like, in what regard? You know what I mean? So kind of getting to understand where they're coming from and what are they looking for, I think will help a lot. Because everybody wants to be more explosive. You know what I mean? But what specifically are you talking about?
Right.
Is it like elastic quality? Is it reactive quality? You know what I mean? Where are you trying to find that gap? Or what's the other one though? So we're out of shape. In what regard is it a capacity issue? Is it a repeat power output issue? Where do you see this? So I think again, like you talked about, finding their terminology and kind of that way working. That way kind of what it is they're looking for a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. If you can find ways to kind of dig into the question a little bit more so it's not as broad and vague. It's like, yeah, if you look at a football team, it's like, hey, we're not in shape. It's like, how so? It was like, everybody's not in shape. The big guys in the front, like in the box, aren't in shape. It's like from play to play, like coming out of a timeout, coming out of the third quarter, fourth quarter, like where does it lie? Like you need to dig a little bit deeper, and then we can figure out, is it power endurance? Is it actually just aerobic endurance? Like they can't recover quickly between bouts at this length. Like what is it? Because you can't just say a vague answer like that,
Right.
and just chalk it up to be we're not fit.
We're not looking that. We're not fit at all time. what capacity? Like what regard? Tell me.
Exactly. Hey, so in terms of like factoring some of these consideration, you talked about it like you're about to be a father yourself. Like there's unknown stress on the horizon for you. Athletes are going through plenty of stress between school, social life. We're dealing with still the remnants of this pandemic and everything. Yeah. How do you kind of factor in, manage, address, and account some of these stresses that happen in practice games and all these other elements of being a student athlete, like when you're actually planning your program, and then for yourself too, like when you're training your cycle, like you can kind of set it up a little bit better, because if you don't feel good in the morning, you can maybe train in the afternoon after you've had lunch, or when no one's in the weight room, and you can kind of crank the volume by yourself. But for them, they're kind of pigeonholed it to, hey, team lifts at 7 a.m., no questions asked, whatever you got. If you got a test at 2, you don't finish, go until sleep till 3 a.m. Like, it is what it is. How do you kind of factor that in when you're going through creating that program for them?
So obviously, like when working right now, these programs, they're a good guideline, I guess the way to put it. In a lot of ways, especially now with this pandemic, this past fall, between not only just the stress of it, but also the way that we had to kind of organize training, and the way that we had to kind of maneuver around the weight room. We could have a certain number of people in, but we would have maybe 2 sports in, and we'd have to be in different spots. And we had to be pretty adaptable, I guess the way to put it. So in a lot of ways, when I was looking at these programs, I was like, okay, I know at the end of the day, again, I would go back to what's the stimulus I want. This is the way I prefer to do it. If I can't get a hinge pattern from a barbell, where am I going to find a hinge pattern? I know that's just what I want. And then in season, especially, there'll be times where I'm like, well, deload is going to be next week, but we're going to deload this week. You kind of always take a look at my athletes, always let them come in, and always wait, because I'll come in about 10 minutes early, and I'll just watch them. I'll just sit and watch. What's the energy level like? Are they talking? Are they pretty quiet? If they're none of these teams are really morning people, but you kind of know what the general mood is in the morning, and you can tell when some mornings, hey, they've got a lot of energy for whatever reason. You're like, cool, pan's hot today, we got to cook. And then there's other days where you can just kind of tell, and they're a little more tired than usual. They're a little bit quieter than usual. And that says to me, hey, stress is probably getting pretty high. Classic, you start seeing the sniffles. That so much of your recoverability is immune driven. I know that immune system's probably on the edge right there. Probably a good idea to back off. When I do get lucky enough sometimes that I can implement VBT with the teams, it's another way I'll auto-regulate. I'll be like, okay, I know that I want, this, I'm looking for this quality, whether it's, strength, speed, strength, whatever. And at that point, honestly, in the program, I'll have a percentage written, but I'll have really the speed that I'm looking for. I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't really care about the weight on that bar. I care about the speed of that bar, especially in season. So again, if they're not there, if the nervous system just isn't there, I'm not going to just throw weight at you. It's not going to do me any good. That might be a day where we back it off a little bit. Maybe we get a little bit of tissue work, we do a little bit of volume and stuff like that. But we're not just throwing a bunch of load at you, and vice versa. There's days where they might have written, hey, I want you to go at 50-60% today, and here's your bar speed, and they're smoking it. Maybe they end up finishing 70-80%. Now you don't get a whole lot of those days, but when you do, you better take advantage of them and help that residual. It's a good time to kind of pick up on some of those. So that's how I tend to try and account for it. So there's kind of a general guideline of, here's a 12-week season, or here's a 10-week season. Here's what I kind of want. But I know there's going to be weeks where we're going to have to flip. This week's going to be a deload week. Maybe this week, we can push a little bit, and if we went really heavy, here, we don't have to go really that heavy again for 4 weeks. Maybe I just readjust percentages, and now we just work a little bit more power for a little bit longer.
That's great. Yeah. I feel like as strength coaches, we already kind of prepared for this. We're adaptable all the time. We seem to be the lowest person on the totem pole, the last person to know when a training session changes, or, hey, practice is going long today. It's like, so you guys, you can lift after practice. The coaches will go home. It's like, oh, cool. Got it.
Thanks. Yeah.
So, we had to be prepared for all this stuff. Like, I know we talked about a little bit about like your guys' COVID situation. Our COVID situations is completely different. So, when we're in a normal situation, we already are pretty adaptable based off the stimulus. But I love what you talk about, like even just sitting back and observing them and seeing how they're interacting. And I love, like, when I have help and I have interns for them, I want them to be out there on the floor, one, building a relationship with those players, but two, you're my little spy. Like, what are they saying? Like, what's going on? I don't want to know what they're doing. I just want to know, like, where they're where they are physically, mentally, like
Right.
where's their mind at. So I know that I can apply the right stimulus, or I know if I have to like control the temperature of the room a little bit more, or maybe I can sit back. And that's one of my favorite things about my baseball guys. When it gets to season, there's probably only a few times like I really have to like get on them, but I have to pick those times because they already got on for 6 hours at practice. The
Right.
rest of the time, they're away from practice. They're actually excited because it's not at the field anymore. So, like you said, the pan's hot. Like, but I sit back. I'm not even in the kitchen anymore at that point. Just let them go.
Right.
No, that's great. What do you say?
No, it's yeah, like you said after practice, like I can't tell you how many coaches always want to lift after practice. Uh, and it kind of cracks me up, but I mean, that's just the reality of it. You're never gonna, yeah, you're never gonna be able to say no. I mean, that's just the situation we're handed. So yeah, you better have a plan to be adaptable. You better have a plan. Okay, you know, well, what do I really kind of need to focus on, and what can we kind of maybe we can trim this, or maybe or vice versa. Hey, we can really get after it today.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's not my favorite either after practice because that means it gives them a free will to like finish whenever they want.
Right,
If I get them in the front end, then like just give me the time that we start, give me the time that I end, and just stay out of the room for that amount of time, and I'll give them to you on time. Trust me,
right.
that's how it works. But it usually is not reciprocated the same way.
No, definitely not.
Hey, so looking at your own program too, like there's obviously a lot of new research coming out. I mean, DSI, RSI, all the buzzwords and everything for sports technology, all the new force plates and everything going on, and just like different periodization schemes and everything. People can kind of get caught in the wind of like what's new and end up program hopping and stuff too. So when you're going about like trying to find ways to test things in your program too, have you ever gotten a situation where you're trying to monitor too many things at once, or you kind of you overcook yourself and you're doing speed development one day and you're doing like a different version of like French contrast another day, and it's just like you almost burn it like the candle from both ends and it's not worth it? Like, how do you prevent yourself from bouncing around too much where you don't really get a true result?
So the first time I took volleyball team here as the winter, uh, my still an intern, and we went through a pretty like classic triphasic block, and so high force, low velocity. I was really excited because I was like, oh, I got really strong numbers, were through the roof, and we went to go test. We got to test verticals, and I thought we're doing all this French contrast, the numbers should be through the roof, and numbers were down, and girls were pretty upset. I was like, I'm so confused. Like, I don't know how this backfired. And I remember I called Matt. We used to work more at Denver. I called Matt Van Dyke up, and I was like, hey, man, like, I don't know what I did wrong. Like, I sent him the program, like, what's going on? And he was kind of like, it's a good learning moment for you. But yeah, he's like, you got to understand, you're feeding one stimulus of a lot of force, low velocity, and then you're asking them to suddenly produce a lot of force very quickly in a jump. Yeah, wait a couple weeks, get them through a power cycle, and I bet your numbers will be through the roof. Is you just got to kind of understand, yeah, you can't get lost and trying to do too much at one time. You got to kind of pick your stimuluses and understand that, like, hey, do this, and then so you can kind of not stack them, kind of build. How is my max strength going to lead into then a little bit more power, and how's that power going to lead to more speed? But he's like, you just can't. The body can only get pulled in so many directions at one time. Like, oh, that's a good point. That I didn't think about it like that. And so I think ever since then I've been kind of just make the main goal, whatever that block is. And then if I'm going to use tech, whether it's the DSI deal or the RSI, whatever, I better make sure that it's to match whatever our goal is, and I better make sure that's to accurately test my goal. Right? I don't need to just throw stuff in there because I think it's exciting. So I think that was a good learning moment for me to kind of understand it. What are you doing? What is the purpose of this block stimulus? What are you asking your athletes, and how are you going to test it? How are you going to ensure that you are getting those results accurately?
Right. No, that's great. I mean, making the main goal your main goal is perfect, and definitely, I still kind of find myself making those same mistakes sometimes. Luckily I catch myself a little bit quicker than I used to, but just trying to hit too many things at once, like you get it, like you want to make the perfect program, you want to make sure you're touching on anything, but I mean, you said it, like the program builds on itself, and if you have a good periodization cycle, like when the goal is that you want to hit it, like when you're testing, you want to peak when you're testing, you want to peak when you actually get in season competition. Then there are times in the year where qualities can drop down, and
Right.
that's perfectly okay. And making sure that you're not just sitting there kind of in that average zone where you're pulling a little bit everywhere, and then test day comes or in season comes, and you're like a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none. You're not
Right.
prepared for what you're
Not
supposed to
fair,
do.
right.
Yeah, that's a great learning lesson, obviously, and that's definitely things that the first few years, like it's just stuff you have to go through.
Right.
And you hope it's not at the cost too much of the athletes, but I mean, sometimes you live and you learn. It's all you can do.
I think sometimes too with some of the tech, like it's easy to see all these bells and whistles, but I think sometimes too, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big guy, so I like to use a lot of tech, but um, sometimes it's just that they just need more fundamentals, whether it's movement quality, whether it's just relative strength, whatever it might be. Don't get lost in trying to put all these bells and whistles on a program, and sometimes all you need is just kind of the basics.
Right.
You just need a little bit more relative strength.
Yeah, no, that's exactly foundational stuff. If you can't get it done with a barbell, you can't do with dumbbells, you can't use one piece of equipment. I mean, you're probably getting too far away from the goal.
Right.
And there are points in times, it's obvious, it's great to have those things. But again, if you're not making the main goal your main goal, and you're drifting too far away from foundational exercises, you're just main principles, then you're probably getting farther away from the results you're looking for as well.
No doubt.
Hey, so
That's sorry, go ahead.
no, go for it.
I was just say what was kind of funny was this past fall with the COVID situation with a lot of these teams, the way that we had to be spaced out in the weight room, and we kind of split our weight room in half to two weight rooms. So we took one outside, one inside, and like you said, getting it done with the dumbbell. I used to be a big not like maximal recoverable body, but we would push our athletes. We use a lot of tier system. We would go 8 or 9 tiers deep, and you just didn't have the time between cleaning, disinfecting, whatever. And so with volleyball, I kind of went not a minimal effective dose, but kind of close to it. We would like, hey, you're gonna have like 4 movements every day, and kind of work that way. And we saw some of the best results we'd seen as far as from a strength standpoint. And it was kind of another learning moment. I was like, maybe sometimes, like we said, just if you can't get done with those objects, maybe you're just doing too much. So yeah, it's an interesting point there. I think we went up. I want to say the girls went up like 30, 40 pounds on a lot of their lifts. And we didn't do a whole lot as far as not only from a volume standpoint, but from just movement. We didn't do a whole lot of movements. We just timing wise between having disinfecting people and stuff like that in the space and we just didn't have time for it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that again, everybody wants to have the perfect program and throw everything in, or throw in like a new sexy exercise, or have everything flow perfectly. But I mean, there's people that have got by going 5x5 on front squat, back squat, and bench and deadlift, and been just fine, just plenty of strong. So
Right.
there's sometimes like having the expertise and the knowledge in the background is literally just putting 4 exercises in there and doing them, executing them perfectly with intent, with purpose, doing your recovery, and then actually doing the sport specific stuff where their sport is.
Right, where the sport is, right? Exactly.
No, it's a great point. So looking at like continuing education stuff, like where do you go for looking for technology? And I know you worked a lot with the DSI, and but on the coaching side, strength conditioning side, even personal side, what are some of the resources you kind of look towards to work on this stuff, either in your own programming and then eventually leading towards your athletes?
I think I kind of bounce around. I listen to just a lot of different like podcasts and stuff like that. I try and see what's kind of the trends right now, what's going on, what are people kind of looking at. I'll tell you the one thing that was kind of the silver lining of the pandemic was we're sitting around doing virtual conferences for 5 months. It's a really great learning opportunity there. But there's just so many there's so many people out there that know so much more than I do, and I know that. You know what I mean? So getting the opportunity to learn from somebody else. So I like to listen to a lot of other people speak, whether that's podcasts, whether that's them doing presentations, stuff like that. That's where I'll generally try and go. I listen to a lot of Joel Smith's interviews for a lot of the speed stuff, and they do a really good job of it. Or like also looking into some of like the neurosensory stuff with Dan and Chris Corfus and this guy Matt Boulay up in Canada, and Sean over in Illinois. But that's kind of where I'll kind of look at what's kind of the not missing link, but what's kind of trending, or what's kind of something I haven't thought about yet. And then I got lucky enough, the DSI, I think I got lucky enough to work with Exergos and working with some of their tech. The thing about the Exergos tech is it's so like price point wise, so cost effective. Because here we don't have a very big budget, so a lot of that stuff I ended up actually buying out of pocket. So we didn't have force plates. We had jump mats. I was like, it's not really good for giving me RSI values. So as I found out about them, I got the G Flight, kind of looked at some of the articles there. And then that's what led me on to the G Strength concept, because we couldn't afford a force plate or a Nordboard. So I actually had Nordboard come down to give us a demo, because I just wanted to see what they were using. Was it just Newtons? Well, how were they? What was their metric? They were gauging their stuff off to that was just Newtons. So I thought, okay, I can reverse engineer that algorithm using a tension reader. So I've got their tension reader. And from that, I kind of was like, okay, now I've got this apparatus that can measure me strength of the lower extremities, whether it was the hammies, adductors, whatever. And then I thought, okay, well, what else can I do? And that's when I thought about, I found the DSI concept. Again, without a force plate, how can we reverse engineer this so that we can still get that value to kind of see where we're at? But yeah, generally, I'll just kind of look at, probably a bad plug. I'll look at Instagram half the time. I'll see what's going on. Other coaches that I know or respect, and what are they kind of doing? What are they looking at? And I'll take their concept. You know what I mean? I don't like, oh, he just did it, so I'm going to do it. But what's the concept here? And I'll kind of investigate that concept, and then from there, I'll kind of go from there and maybe build on that concept a little bit.
No, that's good. I mean, I do it the same way, and yeah, you can't just plug and play those things. I mean, people's situations are different. Obviously, like
Right.
maybe if you were in a different place and you guys had a larger budget, you wouldn't have been doing these things. You probably would have just got force plates right off the bat. So you might not have the opportunity to do these things. So finding context of what it is and investigating those things is a great kind of backup plan for everything.
One of my favorite quotes, and it's just about the value of context, is, a fork's a great utensil, but it's going to be a really shitty tool if you're trying to soup. You know what I mean? So yeah, context is huge. I think you need to understand. And again, I think that's such a valuable lesson into having to really investigate things, in that not having had these bigger budgets, we had to really investigate, well, what do we get at? What's the benefit here? And then what's another way to get there? I think it's really helped me think outside the box.
No, definitely. I mean, more tools in your tool belt, learning about different things, investigating stuff, finding what works, what doesn't work, and then just kind of refining your craft. That's huge. And that's that's the mark of what strength coaches should always be about. Like, it's not the status quo anymore. You can't just kind of claim old school. I saw a Buddy Morris quote today, like about the same thing. It's like, you can't claim to be old school or say, I don't know. There was way too much in it, but basically can't be status quo. You can't sit there and say, this is how we always do it.
Right. Buddy Moore's a great example. He's been coaching forever. But he's one of the most progressive coaches out there, because he just understands that you have to be constantly reevaluating things and their value. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And this is a guy that's been at the highest level, for decades. So I think, there's a great point. You just have to really be able to, and sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes it's looking at your program being like, do I really need to do this part? Whatever that is. There's times where I've looked at my program and said, I really like doing this with my athletes, but it's not really helping us progress to the next level. It was a great tool for this moment. Now we're progressing. It's time to replace it.
Definitely. Yeah. Looking at your own program with a critical eye, and I mean, going through and testing all the stuff on yourself and training it. I mean, I think you're putting yourself in a great position to not only be able to coach it better, but give your athletes a better return on their investment and actually take their training to the next level, because it's been tested by you, it's being coached by you now. So they're kind of getting the best of both worlds. All they got to do is have the work ethic. And from what you're saying, like, I think the Tulsa teams are in a pretty good position. So that's good to hear, man.
I appreciate it.
Hey, so like any good training session, we end the show with a good finisher. So especially since you're a football guy too, we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and maybe a little overtime. So answer the questions as quick as you want, or you could take your time on them and we can go a little bit shorter. But if you want to go rapid fire, it's up to you. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So biggest influence in strength and conditioning and favorite rugby athlete.
Biggest influence in strength and conditioning, I think, is going to be talking about like a person or a tangible object.
About person. Yeah, person.
I think my biggest influence is the field.
You could either. Let's go both. Let's go one of each to
one
the field.
Each.
To the field.
I say to the field. You. To the field, it'd either be really probably be the Russians, but I'd say probably Louis Simmons as far as for American, like for strength conditioning in the States and for collegiate setting, the pro setting, having to think, it's not just about strength. You know what I mean? There's got to be some sort of nervous system component to it, some sort of tendon component to it. I think for me personally, it would have to be, I couldn't say just one of my mentors, but be really any of these people that I got the opportunity to work for. Staff there at Denver with Coach Shaw, Van Dyke was still there, Gary Burrows, and getting to work for Coach Justin Geyer and Drew Wilson, and then Coach McKnight and Eric Anthony over at Texas. Every single one of them has helped me grow. So much has helped. Really, I wouldn't be here where I am without them today. I wouldn't be able to know what I know, or that I really don't know that much and need to know more without them. So they really all help me kind of push me in different directions.
Nice. Hey, so this might change a little bit in the coming weeks, but what can you be found doing when you're not coaching or competing? What are some of your go-to hobbies?
Oh man, my go-to hobbies right now. It's obviously probably going to be being with that kid. But no, right now I really enjoy kind of going through the data that we do have here, whether that's GPS data or just our the numbers that we have for the kids, and then just kind of playing with different concepts. Like if we look at it in terms of whether it's the transfer index or we're looking at different peak power and stuff like that, just kind of evaluating. Again, I love what I do. I wish I could stop thinking about work, but I really can't leave work. That's what I'm thinking about. As far as it's not a work thing, I love, spending time with the family at home. Really, that's kind of, I think, going to be my main priority here coming up soon. But yeah, generally, I'm a workaholic. I'm not gonna lie. I live at the office. I love what I do. I love looking through the stuff and trying to see where we can progress.
Yeah, the family's gonna grow a little bit in the near future.
Yeah.
Hey, so this one, seeing as what you said, you're a workaholic and you like doing what you're doing, this one might throw you for a loop then. If you weren't coaching in strength conditioning, what would you be doing for a career?
Honestly, and I think it's something I didn't realize till recently. I think I would have liked to go to culinary school. I think I would like to be a chef. I don't know why I find it fascinating. I like food. I don't dislike food, but I find the process of watching chefs, like I'll watch a lot of cooking shows. I like the process of how meticulous they are with the way they cook. I think it's a really cool process. And that wasn't something I'd ever had really any interest in until about a year ago. For whatever reason, I think my wife was watching some cooking show and I started watching with her. Oh, you know what? I think it was the kids. It's the Master Chef Junior deal. And I was watching the kids do it. And wow, this is a really meticulous process. And I don't know, whatever reason, I thought it was fascinating.
That's cool. Hey, so if you set up an ideal training session for you, what's your go-to music or PR song? And since you're a chef, what's your go-to post-training meal?
Go-to PR song or go-to, it's going to be some Metallica. I love Metallica. I'll listen to anything, listen to dubstep, rap, country, whatever. But I think with Heavy Day, I think we're putting Metallica on. Go-to meal afterwards, some sort of smoked meat, I'd say.
All right. I like it. I've had some Tulsa barbecue, so I agree with that.
Man, I got a smoker from my boss as a wedding gift. That's changed my life.
That's awesome. Hey, so I got last one for you. Overtime, most valuable piece of advice you've received, and if you want to share from who?
It's going to be, and so it was a fellow intern of mine, and it's not really advice, it's just a question, but it's the way that he said it. And I say this all the time, but I think it just caught me off guard. I can't remember what I was doing ever since then. It's just, what are we doing? I said to myself all the time, what are we doing? And if I can't have a good answer to that, I need to get on that. I need to be task oriented and kind of dial in a little bit. So it's nothing crazy, you know what I mean? It's nothing groundbreaking. But if I find myself, like you talk about being in survival mode, stuff like that, it's kind of my wake up call to myself. I better dial in.
No, I like it. Even though it's not quote advice, whatever you want to call it, it pretty much sums up like what you've been doing, why it seems like you've been real successful, like so far in your career, like finding ways to test things out, like just question what you're doing, question what's the next thing coming up. And it's really cool to see all that stuff and talk to you more about it, because it seems like all the time you're always asking yourself that question. Like, I love following what you do and seeing you train and everything, because it seems like every day you have a new question.
I appreciate it, man. I think a large part of it is me trying to catch your strong competition stuff. That stuff blows my mind. Every time I see it, still blows my mind. I'm like, golly, I don't know how he does that.
So anybody that's got questions for you or anything, how can they reach out to you? How can they get a hold of you, follow you, and just stay up to date with what you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I think my handle is at Christopher Cervantes. I'm on Twitter a lot more these days as well. And I made this handle in college, and it's too late to change it now. But I mean, if you have it, you can DM me on there. It's Cervantes, but it's spelled like SIRR and then VANTS CER. I thought it was pretty funny pun at the time. And now all the Chris Cervantes are taken out. I try to change it. But I'm always available. I'll always get back to people, as quick as I can. Might be a day or two just because we're a little bit busier. But if you have questions, I'm an open book. Feel free to ask me anything. Hit me up.
That's awesome, man. Well, I hope people take it up on it. I mean, it was great to talk to you again and catch up. And hopefully Big 12s are back in Tulsa again. I can come out that way. I'll just have to make a trip without the wrestling, unfortunately. But it was good to have you on today, man. And I enjoyed talking to you. I
appreciate you having me. Yeah, come on up anytime you want, man. We'll get a little training session in. You know what I mean? Maybe we can go out to California. You can show me how it's done out there.
Don't come during the summer, but any other time. I got you covered. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, Chris.
Absolutely.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.